In the UK, the Home Secretary is in the headlines. Suella Braverman is in the eye of the storm again. She's taking on British Pakistani men. She blames them for child sexual abuse. She says they're quote-unquote overwhelmingly behind such cases. This is about organized groups, also called grooming gangs. Braverman says men of Pakistani origin are involved in these crimes and that authorities willfully ignore this. You may ask why. She says it's because they're trying to be politically correct. That's what the Home Secretary says. She says that law enforcement agencies are being politically correct. They take a softer approach to minorities like Muslims. And a Home Secretary is the UK's version of Home Minister. She says the police is soft because they don't want to be called bigots. Now that's a lot to unpack. And not the first time it has been said in the UK that law enforcement agencies overcompensate because they don't want to be called racist. Let me give you some context. Grooming gangs are an old issue in the UK. The theory is this: gangs of British Pakistani men roam about abducting and abusing minor white girls. There have been some very high-profile cases, like cases in Rochdale, Oxford and Telford. And British Pakistani men were involved in these cases, but they weren't the only ones. Braverman's own ministry investigated this. The UK Home Ministry released a report in 2020 and it found, and I'm quoting, group-based offenders are most commonly white. So Braverman is being slammed. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has come to her defense. His official spokesperson has made a statement. He said that British Pakistanis were linked to some grooming gangs and that this was the problem she was trying to highlight. The spokesperson then doubled down on the problem of political correctness. He said it should not hold people back from taking appropriate action. And this is the second time this year that political correctness is in the crosshairs. It came up earlier with the Prevent report. Now, what's that? What is the Prevent report? The UK has a program called Prevent. It's basically to prevent radicalization. Citizens are urged to keep an eye out for signs of radicalization, and if they find any suspicious activity, they should report it. This is the Prevent program. It came under scrutiny recently because the UK saw a lot of high-profile extremist attacks. In 2021, for instance, an MP was killed. His name was Sir David Ames. And he was killed by a man who had been flagged off to Prevent. So people wanted to know if this program was actually working. Was it of any use? The government appointed a reviewer to assess it. And the review report came out in February. It slammed the program. The report said it was only funding generic community projects. It was not focusing on religious extremism. 8 out of 10 plot investigations in the UK were linked to radical Islam. But Prevent, the government program, was failing to prevent them. Because there was, quote-unquote, a culture of timidity when it came to tackling radical Islam. All this begs the question, is political correctness really stopping law enforcement? And in the case of the UK, it seems a bit contradictory because a lot of reports say law enforcement in the UK also has a racial bias. So maybe this political correctness is an overcompensation for years of racist policing. And that too is problematic. You see, no country can afford to go soft on heinous crimes like child sexual abuse or radicalization. In an ideal world, there should be no biases. Is that what Suella Braverman is truly after? An ideal society with no institutional biases and migrants enjoying the good life in Rwanda? Seems like a stretch. But remember, local elections are approaching in the UK. They're scheduled for early May. The ruling Conservative Party is trailing in opinion polls, so the Tories are trying to find ways to rally their support base. Braverman's words are being linked to this. She's been accused of dog whistling. But whatever the case may be, whatever her motivations, we say biases should not hamper justice. And we mean biases of any kind, racism or political correctness. Now let's talk about Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's been called a lot of things like paranoid, someone who has, and I'm quoting, lost touch with the world and is pathologically afraid for his life. These are the words of a former Russian officer. His name is Gleb Karakulov. He defected last year, so take his assessment with a pinch of salt. But his comments are making waves because this man was no ordinary officer. He was part of Putin's secretive elite personal security service. He was quite high up in the ranks. And he is now Russia's highest-ranking defector ever. This man has gone public. He's making some big claims. He's sharing intimate details of Vladimir Putin's life and disclosing potentially classified information. Listen to this.
Our president is cut off from the world. He lives in an information vacuum. In the last couple of years, he spends most of his time in his residences, which media outlets very eloquently call his bunkers. He is pathologically afraid for his life. He has surrounded himself with an impenetrable barrier of quarantine and a lack of any information from the internet.
These are strong words. He also says Putin has, quote-unquote, shut himself off from the world, and there are all kinds of barriers. He quarantines himself. He's scared of COVID. And before meeting him, you have to be quarantined for at least 2 weeks. Then there is what he calls the information vacuum. Apparently, the Russian president avoids using a cell phone. He doesn't use the internet either. So what's his source of information? His inner circle and state TV news channels. That's all that he depends on, apparently. Also, his paranoia seems to have gotten worse since the war in Ukraine began. Putin now reportedly orders bomb shelters for himself.
In October, when I was in Kazakhstan, in addition to the secured phone that we had already installed in the ambassador's office, we installed another phone in a bomb shelter. To be honest, I don't understand why this was done. It is probably already an instance of some kind of paranoia.
And his so-called paranoia even involves airplanes. And we are not referring to flying anxiety, because how can we forget this? We are talking about safety issues. Vladimir Putin now travels on a special armored train. Recently, visuals of his sprawling ski lodge emerged. It's outside the city of Sochi. It boasts of a pickle pantry, a herbal sauna, and a missile defense system. You heard that right. Putin's luxury complex has its own missile defense system. Now, that's called vacationing in style. So you may agree with Karakulov when he says, and I'm quoting again, Putin's take on reality has become distorted. He's also called the president a war criminal.
I consider this man Putin a war criminal. Although I did not participate specifically in these military activities, I do not consider it possible for me to carry out his criminal orders or even to be in his service. For me, this would be too big of a deal for my conscience. I am not ready for this.
But why is this man speaking now? The defector played a crucial role on Putin's side. He was involved in encrypting the leader's communications. He accompanied him to 180 trips in the past 13 years. 180 trips. Must have been a very close aid. And now he's suddenly speaking the language of the West.
He's clearly committed war crimes.
Holding Russian leaders to account for the atrocities they are committing in Ukraine is our collective priority.
This begs the question, is the former Putin aide now aiding the West? Because his account generally conforms with what the West has been saying. And the picture they've been trying to paint over the years, showing Vladimir Putin as once charismatic, but now growing increasingly isolated and unfit to lead a nation. Every once in a while, the Western press carries headlines and speculative stories on Putin's illness. They talk about body doubles and surgeries and Putin taking a fall. There's a lot of speculation, and a lot of it is agenda-driven. So this account could be an exaggeration, but then again, lies flourish where facts are hard to come by. Vladimir Putin has a carefully crafted image of a strong leader. He's been using the domestic press to his advantage for decades. This interview may or may not dent his image, but the details this man has shared will hurt his security for sure. So far, Russia has not commented on any of these statements. And now let's talk about the rising tide of global layoffs. Last year's tech-wide reckoning is not letting up, and it's going beyond big tech. You already know this. Layoffs have been making headlines every other day. Only this week, many big firms joined the tide, including UBS, with the largest job cuts globally in the past 6 months. McDonald's, Walmart, Apple, and Highland Software. In the last 6 months, more than 500,000 employees have been sacked. Some are now staging walkouts. Others are taking buyouts. It has shaken the economy, which is already under pressure from central banks and fighting a high-stakes battle with inflation. There is a sharper risk of recession, which threatens even bigger job losses. It sounds like a vicious cycle, but this is what we have. Here's a report. The rush of layoffs began late last year, and it is not willing to stop. Since October, over 500,000 workers have been sacked, with over 50,000 jobs lost in 1 week in January alone. And right now, different companies are dealing with this in different ways. Let's look at General Motors. The auto company planned to lower staff numbers in a cost-cutting effort. Now, 5,000 of their white-collar employees have taken buyouts. This can help them avoid layoffs and also save the company $1 billion every year. Meanwhile, fast food chain McDonald's has no such genius plans. It is restructuring the company, which is corporate lingo for laying off people. And they're hiding behind closed doors, literally. McDonald's closed its US offices this week while it prepares to tell employees about their fate. Employees are now working from home, waiting to know if they have been fired. But some workers elsewhere are not taking this lying down. Google plans to lay off 12,000 employees worldwide. That's about 6% of its global workforce. Now there's a dispute. Employees claim Google has rejected their proposals to reduce job cuts. And hundreds of workers have staged a walkout at the company's London offices, just like they did at the Zurich offices of Google last month.
I think what happened is not really fair. It could have happened in a different way. And it's a little bit disappointing to see a company that you believed in so much managing people like that, like handling people like that.
It's sad. I think they're missing out on some amazing brains and some amazing minds that suddenly just think, what's the point? This could be me.
It's just been a tick box exercise for the management. We told them that if they didn't fix things, they'd likely to see a lot of individual grievances, and that's happened. It's been very badly handled for a company that once had its strapline of "Don't be evil." It's been pretty evil in the way they've treated the staff. They didn't need to do this.
Layoffs are mounting across industries. The UBS Group is a recent addition. It plans to lay off 36,000 workers, making it the company with the largest job cuts globally in the past 6 months. This is coming on the heels of the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. It happened last month and sent shockwaves through the economy, which has already been shaken by mass layoffs. And UBS is one of the 760 firms who have participated in mass layoffs. As imagined, the tech sector has had the biggest losses, making up about a third of the total cuts. But the damage goes much beyond this industry. Layoffs have been seen in communications, financial, healthcare, and even real estate sectors. And this is happening at an odd time for the economy. The labor market is doing well, unemployment has stayed low, there is uncertainty over recession, but companies overhired during the pandemic, and now the people must pay for it, which leaves employees in a precarious position. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with India tonight. A major avalanche has struck Nathula in the northeastern state of Sikkim. 7 people have died. In Peru, many regions are hit by storms and floods. Thousands of homes have been destroyed. In Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan pulled off another stunt, and this one will crack you up. He went to court wearing some very unusual headgear. Apparently a bulletproof bucket that covered his entire face. Imran Khan was visibly struggling to navigate his way, much like his political career. Full marks for creativity, though. It could make for a good Halloween costume. And finally, what happened on this day in history? Winston Churchill, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, resigned. The year was 1955. Churchill was 80 years old. He was serving his second term. He had suffered a series of strokes since 1949. His ill health forced him to step down. He was a celebrated leader in the UK, but for Indians, he was a racist white man who looked down upon people of colour and their calibre. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.